My pen was hovering over the signature line of the biggest loan application of my life when my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. "Dad, are you seeing this?" My daughter Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, tied with barely controlled panic. "There are moving trucks at your store. Right now. 3 of them." The pen dropped from my fingers, leaving an ink splatter across the $750,000 expansion loan documents. Across the table, Mr. Harrison from Midwest Commercial Banking frowned at the interruption. We had been sitting in his corner office for over an hour, reviewing the paperwork that would finally allow me to purchase the vacant lot next to Harrison's Hardware and Supply, the business my grandfather started in 1952. This was supposed to be the culmination of 42 years of my life, the dream my father always talked about but never had the capital to achieve. "What trucks?" I asked, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the polished concrete floor. "Moving trucks, big ones with yellow lettering," Sarah said. "They are carrying boxes and equipment out of your loading dock. I am watching them right now from my apartment window across the street. 3 guys in blue uniforms, they are loading everything. My name is Walter Harrison, and I am 63 years old. He spent 35 years as a bank auditor before taking over our family hardware store 8 years ago when my wife Margaret got sick. She passed away 4 years back from ovarian cancer, and that store has been my anchor ever since. My grandfather built Harrison's Hardware during the post-war boom when every family in our small Iowa town was building something new. 3 generations of Harrison men had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into that business. That Tuesday morning in October, I thought the worst thing that could happen was getting turned down for a loan. He was dead wrong. "Did you schedule movers?" Sarah asked. He could hear her moving around, probably getting a better view from her kitchen window. "Hell no," I said, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair. "I will be right there. Call the police and tell them what you are seeing." That is when I heard something that stopped me cold in my tracks. Through the thin wall separating Mr. Harrison's private office from the conference room next door, I heard a laugh I knew as well as my own heartbeat. It was my brother Mark, my 57-year-old younger brother. He was supposed to be in Des Moines visiting his grandson for the week. But that was definitely his voice coming from the adjacent office, and he was laughing like someone who had just pulled off the greatest heist of his life. He left those loan papers scattered on that desk and drove the 12 blocks to my store faster than I should have. The whole way my mind was racing. Mark had been acting peculiar lately, more interested in the business than usual, always asking about expansion plans, profit margins, insurance policies, and my retirement timeline. He thought he was just being supportive after everything we had been through with his messy divorce 3 years ago. By the time I got to the store, the trucks were gone. All that remained were tire tracks in the gravel parking lot and that sickening feeling you get when you know something is terribly wrong but cannot quite put your finger on what. Sarah met me at the front door, her phone already out with pictures ready. "I got photos of everything," she said, pressing the device into my trembling hands. The trucks, the license plates, the men carrying stuff out. He did not know what else to do. I scrolled through her images with hands that were starting to shake uncontrollably. Professional movers in uniforms marked Iowa Premier Moving Services. They had loaded at least 30 boxes, plus what looked like my computer equipment, filing cabinets, and the antique cash register my grandfather had used for 40 years. The same equipment that held 42 years of business records, customer lists, vendor contracts, supplier information, and decades of financial data. The police showed up within 20 minutes. Officers Davis and Chen, both young enough to be my grandchildren, took my statement with the kind of patient politeness you give to confused elderly citizens. They dusted for fingerprints and found none. They examined the locks and found no signs of forced entry. Then they checked the security system I had installed after Margaret passed away. M.A.R. Harrison, Officer Davis said, frowning at her tablet. According to Sentinel Security's records, your alarm system was disabled yesterday at 4:12 de la tarde using the master code. The building was accessed again this morning at 8:45 de la mañana, also using the master code. Both entries show up as fully authorized. Authorized. That word hit me like a physical blow to the chest. He had not given my security code to anyone except Mark. Last year, when I had to go to the hospital for some heart complications, he had offered to check on the store for me. He had given him the code because he was my younger brother and I trusted him with my life. The officers suggested I change my security codes and inventory what was missing. They left with sympathetic smiles, but I could see exactly what they were thinking. Family drama, probably just a misunderstanding. Maybe the brother borrowed some things without asking first. If I had been anyone else, I might have bought that explanation. But I had spent 35 years as a bank auditor, tracking down people who thought they were smarter than the system. He knew that crimes do not happen in isolation. They have patterns, motivations, and most importantly, they leave trails. After the cops left, I walked through my store like I was processing a crime scene. He was not looking for what was missing yet. He was looking for what was different, and 3.5 decades of fraud investigation had trained my eyes to catch details that most people would miss completely. The office area had been thoroughly disturbed. Nothing obvious to the untrained eye, just small changes that only someone who had worked in that space for 8 years would notice. My desk chair was angled 3 degrees to the right. The coffee mug I always kept in the exact same spot was 2 inches to the left. The dust pattern on my filing cabinet had fresh finger streaks running through them like someone had been searching for something specific. He opened that filing cabinet with growing dread in the pit of my stomach. My instincts were screaming that whatever I found in there was going to change everything I thought I knew about my family. Half the business documents were gone. The original articles of incorporation that established Harrison's Hardware and Supply as a family business in 1952 were gone. The partnership agreement I had drawn up 15 years ago giving Mark a 30% stake when he got married was gone. The commercial property deed was gone. The business insurance policy was gone. In their place was a single sheet of paper I had never seen before in my life. It was a new partnership agreement dated 4 months ago transferring 55% ownership of Harrison's Hardware and Supply to Mark Harrison and his new wife, Patricia. My signature was at the bottom, notarized by someone named Rachel Simmons on June 12. The document looked official, professional, and completely legitimate, except I had never signed it. He had never heard of Rachel Simmons, and on June 12, I had been at the Mayo Clinic getting my annual cardiac checkup. Something Mark knew because he had driven me there himself. My hands were shaking as I stared at that forged signature, but my mind was already shifting into investigator mode. 35 years of catching financial criminals had taught me to think like the perpetrators. This was not some spur-of-the-moment theft. This was planned, methodical, and executed by someone who knew my schedule, my business, and my vulnerabilities better than anyone else in the world. That night, I did what I had done for 3 decades in fraud cases. I followed the money. First, I logged into our business bank accounts online. What I found made my stomach drop like a stone in water. Over the past 4 months, someone had been writing checks to companies I had never heard of. Iowa Wholesale Supply for $22,000, Midwest Equipment Solutions for $12,000, Prairie State Services for $18,000, all signed with my electronic signature authorization but processed through an email I did not recognize, mark.harrison.business@gmail.com. I called the bank's after-hours fraud line. The representative confirmed my worst suspicions. The electronic signature system had been set up using my social security number and driver's license information, but through Mark's email address. Someone had been systematically draining our business account for months, and I had not noticed because the withdrawals were spread out and disguised as legitimate business expenses. Next, I pulled up our commercial insurance records through the online portal. 3 claims had been filed in the past 2 months for stolen inventory. Each one for $9,500, just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger a detailed investigation requiring physical inspection. The insurance payouts totaling nearly $30,000 had been direct deposited to an account at Community Bank, not our usual First Iowa National. By 3 in the morning, I had pieced together the scope of what Mark and Patricia were doing. The forged partnership agreement gave them legal cover to claim majority ownership. The fake vendor payments were draining our operating capital. The fraudulent insurance claims provided additional quick cash, and I was betting that Community Bank account led straight to their personal finances. But knowing it and proving it in court were two completely different things. The next morning, I made a call I had hoped I would never have to make in my lifetime. Thomas Brennan had been the FBI's senior financial crimes investigator on a pension fraud case I had worked as an expert witness 8 years earlier. We had spent 9 months in conference rooms building the case that eventually sent 4 corporate executives to federal prison for 20 years total. Thomas had retired from the bureau 3 years ago and started his own investigation firm specializing in family financial crimes. "Walter," Thomas said when I finished explaining everything over the phone, "I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How certain are you that Mark is involved in this?" "Thomas, I have been investigating financial fraud since before you were born. Every single piece of evidence points to someone with inside access, knowledge of my medical schedule, and legal authority to make business decisions. There is only one person who fits that profile completely. I know this is incredibly difficult," he said gently. "But elder financial abuse by family members is more common than people want to believe. The average victim loses over $130,000, and most cases are never even reported because of family loyalty. You are doing the right thing by looking into this thoroughly." We met at Thomas's office that afternoon. His plan was methodical and thorough, exactly what I expected from someone who had built his reputation taking down sophisticated white-collar criminals. "First," he said, "we are going to subpoena the records from that notary service. Rachel Simmons will have to explain who actually showed up at her office to sign those documents. Second, we are going to trace every one of those fake vendor payments. I guarantee you those shell companies lead back to accounts Mark and Patricia control. Third, we are going to get the security footage from the bank when that electronic signature system was set up." "How long will this take?" he asked. 2 weeks to build a solid, airtight case. "But Walter, I need you to promise me something very important. You cannot confront Mark until we have everything locked down completely. If he knows we are investigating, he will have time to destroy evidence or create alibis. Can you act completely normal around him for 2 more weeks?" I thought about Mark's face the last time I had seen him, asking casual questions about the store's insurance coverage. He thought about Patricia's sudden interest in my retirement plans and my will. He thought about my grandfather working 16-hour days during the post-war boom to build something that would last for generations. I have been acting normal around suspects my entire career, I said. I can handle 2 more weeks easily. But those 2 weeks nearly killed me. Mark called 3 times to check on my health, asking about my heart medication and upcoming doctor's appointments. He stopped by the store twice to help with inventory, spending hours going through our remaining filing cabinets. Every conversation felt like swallowing broken glass, but I smiled and played the grateful older brother who appreciated his concern. Meanwhile, Thomas's team was building an airtight case piece by piece. The notary, Rachel Simmons, cracked within hours when confronted with evidence of document fraud. She admitted Mark had hired her. Mark had presented the fake documents, and Mark had signed my name while Rachel pretended not to notice the Walter Harrison on the ID was clearly a man with different hair color and 20 pounds lighter. The shell companies were registered to a law firm Patricia had used for her previous business ventures. Iowa Wholesale Supply existed only as a bank account. Midwest Equipment Solutions was registered to Mark's home address. Brady State Services was completely fictitious. The banking records told the real story. That community bank account had received $85,000 over 4 months. The fake vendor payments plus the insurance fraud payouts. But the money had not stayed there long. Thomas' forensic accountant traced exactly where every dollar had gone. And the picture that emerged was one of desperation and greed that made my stomach turn violently. $32,000 had gone to pay off Patricia's credit card debts from 5 different banks. Another $22,000 covered gambling losses at the Prairie Meadows Casino in Des Moines. Patricia had been betting on everything from college basketball to horse racing and online poker. $18,000 went toward the down payment on a new BMW that was titled in Patricia's name. The remaining $13,000 had been withdrawn as cash over several weeks, probably to fund their ongoing expenses without leaving a paper trail. But the most damaging evidence came from Mark's own phone. Thomas's contacts in digital forensics had obtained his text messages through a court order. The messages between Mark and Patricia painted a clear picture of premeditation and callous disregard for our family legacy. Walter is at his Mayo appointment, Mark had texted on June 12. Notary is here. Getting the partnership papers signed right now. Patricia's response came back immediately, perfect. How much longer before we can sell the whole thing? Mark's reply. Need to drain more cash first. A is too sharp to miss a sudden sale. Give me 6 months to clean out the accounts completely, then we list the property for sale. 6 months. They were not planning to just steal from the business. They were planning to sell our grandfather's store and pocket the entire $900,000 value of the property and inventory. The worst message was from just 3 weeks earlier. Walter is getting suspicious about the insurance claims. May need to speed up the timeline. Can we get him declared incompetent? His heart condition is getting worse. They were not just stealing from me. They were planning to have me declared mentally unfit so they could take complete control of everything I had worked my entire life to preserve and protect. By the end of the second week, Thomas had built a federal case that would have made my old bank proud. Wire fraud for the electronic signature scheme. Bank fraud for the fake vendor payments. Insurance fraud for the phony claims. And elder abuse for the systematic targeting of someone they perceived as vulnerable and dependent on family. We are ready, Thomas told me on a Friday afternoon. But I want to give them one last chance to hang themselves completely. Are you up for a little bit of theater? The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would invite Mark and Patricia to dinner at the store to discuss making Mark a bigger part of the business operations. Mark's greed would do the rest. It would see it as the perfect opportunity to push for more control, not knowing we had federal agents positioned outside and recording equipment throughout the entire building. I called Mark that evening, putting every ounce of tired older brother into my voice. Mark, I have been thinking about what you said last week about helping more with the business. Could you and Patricia come to dinner Sunday night at the store? I want to discuss some important changes. The excitement in his voice was unmistakable and sickening. Of course, Walter. We would love to. Sold we bring anything? Just yourselves. I am making Margaret's famous pot roast recipe. We need to have a family talk about the future of Harrison's Hardware. Sunday came with the kind of bright Iowa autumn weather that made you believe in new beginnings. I spent the afternoon preparing Margaret's famous pot roast using the recipe she had perfected over 30 years of marriage. He set up a table in the office area right next to the filing cabinet they had robbed 5 weeks earlier. Every detail had to look completely natural and celebratory. Mark and Patricia arrived at 6 de la tarde sharp. Patricia was wearing a new outfit that probably cost more than most of my customers made in a week. Mark had his arm around her like they were walking into their own victory celebration, which I suppose they thought they were. Something smells absolutely incredible, Patricia said, giving me a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. You have really outdone yourself, Walter. Mark shook my hand with the firm grip of a man who thought he was about to close the biggest deal of his life. Thanks so much for doing this, Walter. We really appreciate you including us in the business planning. We sat down to dinner, and I let them guide the conversation completely. Patricia talked about how proud she was of our family legacy and how much the store meant to the community. Mark shared some ideas about modernizing our customer base and expanding into online sales and delivery services. They were setting up their pitch perfectly, and I played the grateful older brother who genuinely valued their input and enthusiasm. Finally, over coffee and Margaret's famous apple pie, Mark reached across the table and put his hand on mine. Walter, he said, his voice soft with practiced emotion. Patricia and I have been talking about your situation quite a bit. Running this store is getting to be too much for you, especially with your health problems. The heart condition, the stress, all the paperwork and regulations. Patricia nodded solemnly from across the table. We were thinking maybe it is time to consider selling the business and splitting the proceeds. You could retire properly and move to one of those nice senior communities in Florida. Enjoy your golden years without all this responsibility weighing you down. I looked at Mark's hand on mine and remembered teaching him to ride a bike in the store's parking lot. He remembered his high school graduation, walking him down the aisle at his first wedding, holding his daughter when she was born. For 57 years, I had been the older brother who protected him, guided him, and sacrificed for him. Then I remembered that forged signature on the partnership agreement. Actually, I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. I have been thinking about the business quite a lot lately. In fact, I have been doing some pretty detailed research into our finances and legal structure. Mark's smile faltered slightly. Patricia's hand tightened around her coffee cup like she was holding on for dear life. Really? Mark said, trying to keep his voice light and casual. What kind of research have you been doing? He placed a manila folder on the table between us. Mark went pale as a ghost. Patricia knocked over her water glass, sending liquid spreading across the table toward the folder. He did not move to clean up the spill. I just watched them both with the cold, calculating as of a man who had spent 35 years catching criminals. That folder contains copies of the fraudulent partnership agreement you filed with the county recorder, I said, using the same calm, methodical voice I had perfected in decades of depositions and fraud interviews. It also contains bank records showing the $85,000 you have stolen through fake vendor payments and insurance fraud. The digital forensics report proving you set up electronic signature access using my credentials. And the text messages between you two planning to have me declared incompetent so you could sell our grandfather's store. Mark started crying, whether from fear, shame, or just getting caught, I could not tell. Patricia looked like a trapped animal, her eyes darting toward the door with pure desperation. Please don't try to run, I said to her calmly. There are FBI agents in the parking lot. This is now a federal case. Wire fraud, bank fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. Thomas Brennan sends his regards, by the way. Patricia's face went completely gray. She knew that name from her business dealings. Everyone in the financial world knew about Thomas's reputation for taking down sophisticated white-collar criminals. Walter, Mark choked out through his tears. Please, you have to understand. We were desperate. Patricia's business failed completely. The divorce took everything I had saved. We were going to lose the house and everything else. He was going to pay it all back, I swear on our mother's grave. He looked at my younger brother, this man I had helped raise after our father died in that farming accident when Mark was only 16. He had walked him down the aisle at his first wedding. He had been in the delivery room when his daughter was born. For 41 years, I had been the older brother who protected him, guided him, made sacrifices so he could have a better life than we had growing up. But sitting across from him now, I saw something that broke my heart more than all the stolen money combined. Mark had not just betrayed me, he had convinced himself that he was the victim in this situation. You were not trying to protect your family, I said quietly. You were stealing from it. There is a world of difference. The next hour was controlled chaos. Thomas' team entered with federal agents. Mark and Patricia were read their rights while I called Mark's ex-wife to come get their daughter, who was supposed to stay with them that weekend. That 16-year-old girl would grow up knowing her father was a convicted criminal. That wound would never fully heal for her. Over the following weeks, the full scope of their operation became painfully clear. This was not their first fraudulent scheme. Patricia had been running similar scams across 3 different states, targeting elderly business owners and vulnerable family members. Mark had been her inside person, using family relationships to gain trust and access to financial records. They had already defrauded Patricia's end in Missouri out of $52,000 using fake medical emergency stories. They had plans to target my cousin Rachel in Kansas, who owned a successful bakery and catering business. The FBI found evidence of at least 8 other potential victims on Patricia's computer and phone records. The federal prosecutors offered Patricia a deal if she would testify about her broader fraud network and help them recover assets for other victims. She took it faster than you would take shelter from a tornado in Iowa. Mark, confronted with mountains of evidence and his partner's testimony, pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have destroyed what was left of our family's reputation in our small town. Mark was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Patricia got 6 years due to her leadership role in the broader fraud network. The forged partnership agreement was voided completely. The fraudulent loans were removed from our business credit history. Thomas's contacts in banking helped me implement security measures that would prevent this kind of inside access in the future. We recovered about $32,000 of the stolen money through asset forfeiture and property seizure, but most of it was gone forever. The BMW was sold. Patricia's jewelry collection went to pay restitution. Mark's share of our parents' estate was liquidated to help make victims whole. It was not enough to make me financially whole, but it was justice. My niece lives with her mother now, which is probably the best outcome for everyone involved. I see her around town sometimes. She is growing into a good young woman despite everything her father put her through. I do not tell her all the details about Mark's crimes. Someday she will learn the truth herself when she is old enough to handle it. For now, I let her believe her father made some bad choices and is paying the consequences for them. These days, I still run Harrison's Hardware with help from a store manager I hired after my health took a hit from all the stress. The heart condition is manageable with medication and lifestyle changes, but the betrayal aged me more than any disease ever could. The business is stable, profitable, and finally ready to pass on to the next generation, if there is one willing to carry on the legacy. I also found a new purpose I never expected in my retirement years. Last month, I spoke at the Iowa Small Business Association conference about family financial fraud prevention. The week before, I helped another hardware store owner in Davenport catch his son stealing inventory and falsifying records. Turns out the skills my grandfather's store taught me, attention to detail, understanding people's motivations, protecting what matters most, are exactly what other business owners need to survive these kinds of devastating attacks. Sarah still keeps an eye on the store from across the street, and we have become closer friends through all this shared trauma. She reminds me that my grandfather would be incredibly proud, not just that I saved the business, but that I am using the experience to help others protect theirs. Sometimes I think about Mark in his prison cell, and I feel something I cannot quite name. It is not satisfaction. It is not exactly grief either. It is something colder and more permanent, like a scar that has healed but never stops reminding you that it is there. This whole experience taught me that family loyalty and family trust are not the same thing at all. You can love someone completely while still protecting yourself from their worst impulses. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when, especially when, that someone is your own flesh and blood. Our grandfather's store is not just surviving now. It is helping other families survive, though. And maybe that is the legacy he would have wanted most of all. The skills that built your career do not disappear when you retire. They become the weapons that can save your life when everything you have worked for is under attack from the people you trusted most. Blood may be thicker than water, but it is not thicker than evidence. And sometimes protecting your family's legacy means protecting it from your own family. The trial had been over for 6 months when I received the letter. It was from Mark, written on prison stationery with the careful handwriting of a man who had too much time on his hands. He almost threw it away without opening it. But something made me tear open the envelope and read what my younger brother had to say from behind bars. Dear Walter, I know you probably hate me, and I don't blame you for that. I hate myself too. Every day I wake up in this cell, I think about what I did to you, to our family, to our father's memory. There is no excuse for what I did. Desperation doesn't make betrayal right. He was greedy and weak, and I let Patricia convince me that we deserved more than what we had worked for. But that's not true. We didn't deserve anything we didn't earn honestly. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for you to visit me. He just wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away. Our family. Our legacy. Your trust. These things cannot be replaced with money, and I was a fool to think they could be. Your brother, Mark. He read that letter 3 times before I put it down. The words were carefully crafted, probably written with the help of a prison counselor who specialized in restorative justice. But I could hear Mark's voice in every sentence. He could see the little boy I had taught to ride a bike. He could see the teenager I had helped with his homework. He could see the young man I had walked down the aisle at his wedding. And for the first time since that terrible Tuesday morning, I allowed myself to feel something other than cold, hard anger. It was grief, pure and simple. Grief for the brother I had lost long before the FBI came knocking on his door. Grief for the family we could have been if greed had not poisoned everything. He did not write back. Not yet. But I kept the letter in my desk drawer, right next to the original partnership agreement that had started everything. 18 months passed. Mark served his time with good behavior and was released on parole. He moved to a small town in Missouri where nobody knew his history. He got a job at a hardware store, ironically enough, working the register and helping customers find the right screws and nails. He sent me a second letter, shorter this time, just letting me know he was working and paying back his restitution money a little at a time. He mentioned that his daughter had agreed to speak with him again, tentatively, with a therapist present. He said he was grateful for that small mercy. He still did not write back. But I started checking his online profile, just to make sure he was still alive and staying out of trouble. He told myself it was just practical caution. But the truth was, I still loved my brother, even after everything he had done to me. Then came the third letter, the one that finally broke through my walls. Dear Walter, I don't know if you will ever speak to me again, and I accept that as the consequence of my choices. But I wanted you to know that I've started attending a support group for people who have committed financial crimes against their families. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, so I can make sure I never do anything like that again. One of the things they talk about in the group is making amends. Not just paying back money, but trying to restore what was broken in a relationship if the other person is willing. I don't expect you to be willing. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, trying to become the man our father thought I could be. I don't deserve your trust. But maybe someday I can earn a small piece of it back. Your brother, Mark. I sat in my office at Harrison's Hardware, surrounded by the legacy our grandfather had built, and I thought about forgiveness. I thought about all the years I had spent investigating fraud cases, watching families torn apart by greed and betrayal. He had never seen a case where the perpetrator truly changed. But I had also never seen a case where the perpetrator was my own brother. He picked up my phone and dialed the number on the letter. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Mark said, his voice hesitant and uncertain. Mark, I said. It's Walter. I've been thinking about what you wrote. And I think maybe we should have a conversation. Face to face. At the store. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Mark's breathing, ragged and emotional. I would like that more than anything, he finally said. I will come whenever you're ready. Next Saturday, I said. At noon. We have lunch in the office, just like we used to do when we were kids and Dad was still alive. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. He set up the office table with sandwiches and lemonade, just like Margaret used to do when she was alive. He did not know what I was going to say to Mark. He did not know if I could ever fully trust him again. But I knew I had to try, for our family's sake, for our father's memory, and for the legacy that had meant so much to all of us. Mark showed up at exactly noon, looking older and thinner than I remembered. He had the hollow look of someone who had spent years in a cage, both literal and metaphorical. He stood at the door of the office like a stranger asking for entry into his own home. "Come in," I said. "Sit down. Eat something." Mark sat across from me at the same table where we had shared meals as children, as young men, as middle-aged brothers running a business together. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything between us pressing down like a physical force. Finally, Mark spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't even expect you to trust me. I just want you to know that I understand now what I destroy. Not just the money. The trust. The love. The family." I put down my sandwich and looked at my brother, really looked at him, for the first time in years. He saw the little boy I had protected from bullies. He saw the teenager I had helped through his first heartbreak. He saw the man who had stood beside me at our father's funeral. And I saw the broken man who had let greed and desperation turn him into someone I did not recognize. "I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine between us," I said carefully. "I'm not going to pretend that I can just forget what you did. But I am willing to try to rebuild something. Slowly. Carefully. With boundaries and rules and absolutely no access to the business finances." Mark nodded, tears streaming down his face. "That's more than I deserve," he said. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back even a fraction of what I threw away. I know I can never fully repay you. But I can try." We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. Not about the business, not about the money, but about our lives. Mark told me about the therapy he was in, the support group, the small steps he was taking to become a better person. He told him about my health struggles, my loneliness since Margaret passed, my fears for the future of the store. By the time the rain cleared and the sun came out, something had shifted between us. It was not forgiveness exactly. It was something closer to hope. Hope that even the deepest wounds could heal, given enough time and effort. Hope that our family's legacy could include redemption as well as success. But hope alone was not enough. The weeks that followed our first meeting were filled with awkward phone calls and hesitant visits. Mark would stop by the store on Saturdays to help with minor tasks, always careful to stay in the front of the building where customers could see him. He never asked to see the office. He never asked about the financial records. He just showed up, did whatever work I gave him, and left without making any demands. I watched him like a hawk, my 35 years of fraud investigation instincts refusing to fully shut off. He checked the security logs every morning. He reviewed the bank statements every night. He waited for the other shoe to drop, for the betrayal to repeat itself, for my brother to show his true colors once again. But nothing happened. Month after month, Mark remained consistent. He showed up on time. He did his work without complaint. He never asked for money or access to sensitive information. He just wanted to be near the family business again, even if it meant sweeping floors and stocking shelves. My niece, Mark's daughter, graduated from college that spring. She had spent her teenage years dealing with the shame of her father's crimes, the whispered gossip in our small town, the pitying looks from teachers and classmates. But she had also spent those years working hard, studying business management, and dreaming of a future where the Harrison name meant something good again. She came to me with a proposal that took my breath away. "Uncle Walter," she said, sitting across from me at the same office table where I had confronted her father. "I want to take over the store. Not now, but eventually. I want to learn everything you know about running this business. And I want to prove that our family's legacy can survive what my father did." I looked at this young woman, barely 22 years old, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. She had every reason to walk away from the Harrison name, to start fresh somewhere far away from the scandal and the shame. But she wanted to stay. She wanted to fight for the store her great-grandfather had built. "Are you sure about this?" he asked her. "Running a hardware store is not easy work. It's long hours and small margins and customers who always think they know more than you do." She laughed, a sound that reminded me so much of Margaret that my heart ached. "I know, Uncle Walter. I've been coming here since I was a little girl. I remember helping Grandpa stock shelves when I was 8 years old. This store is in my blood. And I want to be part of its future." I agreed to take her on as a trainee, starting with the basics. Inventory management, customer service, vendor relations, financial record keeping. I taught her everything my grandfather had taught me, everything I had learned in 35 years of bank auditing, everything I had discovered through the painful experience of being betrayed by someone I loved. She soaked up the knowledge like a sponge, asking questions, taking notes, staying late to study the books. She was determined to prove herself, to earn the trust that her father had thrown away so carelessly. And slowly, over the months that followed, I began to realize that she was exactly what the store needed. Not just to survive, but to thrive. She brought new energy to the business, new ideas, new connections with younger customers who had grown up with big box stores and online shopping. Meanwhile, Mark continued his quiet work in the background. He never asked for recognition or praise. He never complained about his limited role. He just showed up every day, did his job, and went home. He paid his restitution on time, every month, without fail. He attended his support group meetings and his therapy sessions. He wrote letters to his daughter, even when she did not respond. He was rebuilding his life, piece by broken piece, and I was watching it happen with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant admiration. But I still did not fully trust him. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too fresh, the memories too painful. Every time I saw him smile, I remembered the forged signature on the partnership agreement. Every time he offered to help, I remembered the text messages planning to have me declared incompetent. Every time he said he loved me, I remembered the $85,000 he had stolen from our family legacy. The turning point came on a cold December morning, nearly 2 years after Mark's release from prison. He woke up with a crushing pain in my chest, unable to breathe, unable to move. My heart condition, the one that had been manageable for so long, had finally caught up with me. He reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers numb and clumsy. He dialed the first number that came to mind. It was not 911. It was Mark. Walter. His voice was groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Air," I managed to gasp out. "Call ambulance." And then everything went black. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later, surrounded by beeping machines and concerned doctors. The first face I saw was Mark's, haggard and pale, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "You're awake," he said, his voice cracking with relief. "You've been out for 3 days. They had to do emergency surgery. You almost died, Walter." He looked at my brother, this man who had once tried to steal everything from me. And I saw something in his eyes that I had not seen in years. Genuine, unselfish love. The love of a little brother for his older brother. The love of a man who had made terrible mistakes and was desperate to make things right. "You saved my life," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "I called 911, Mark said. "I stayed with you the whole time. He called your doctors. He called Sarah. He called your lawyer. He made sure everything was taken care of. He had been there, by my side, for 3 full days. He had not left the hospital once, not even to shower or change his clothes. He had handled all the arrangements, dealt with the doctors, contacted all the necessary people. He had done everything I would have done for him, if our positions had been reversed. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. The wall I had built around my heart, the wall of anger and betrayal and suspicion, began to crack. It did not crumble completely. It could not after everything that had happened. But it cracked enough to let a little light through. Enough to let me see my brother not as a criminal, not as a betrayer, but as a flawed human being who was trying his best to become someone better. "Thank you," I said, reaching out to take his hand. "Thank you for being here." Mark squeezed my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I will always be here for you, Walter. You know I don't deserve your trust. You know I broke something that can never be fully repaired. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did." That's a promise. He believed him. Not completely, not without reservation, but enough to start the long, slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It would not happen overnight. It might not happen in my lifetime. But it was a start. And sometimes, that is all you can ask for. The weeks that followed my surgery were difficult. I was weak and tired, dependent on others for things I had always done for myself. Mark stepped up in ways I never expected. He moved into my spare bedroom to help with my recovery. He cooked my meals, drove me to doctor's appointments, helped me with my physical therapy exercises. He never complained, never asked for anything in return. He just did what needed to be done, the way a brother should. Sarah came to visit often, bringing her children and homemade meals. She watched Mark with cautious eyes, still not fully trusting him, but willing to give him a chance for my sake. My niece came too, spending weekends learning the business while I recovered. The store was running smoothly, thanks to the systems I had put in place and the security measures I had implemented after the fraud. But the most unexpected development came from Patricia. After serving her time in federal prison, she had been released on parole and was living in a halfway house in another state. She had been diagnosed with a serious health condition, the result of years of stress and poor choices. She wrote to me, a letter filled with apologies and regret, asking if I would consider forgiving her for her role in the fraud. I read her letter 3 times before I made a decision. I did not forgive her. I could not. She had been the mastermind behind the scheme, the one who had targeted vulnerable business owners across 3 states. She had used my brother as a tool, manipulated his weaknesses, and destroyed our family for money. But I did not hate her anymore. Hatred was too heavy a burden to carry, and I had already carried it for too long. He wrote back to Patricia, a short letter that said I did not forgive her but I did not wish her ill. He told her I hoped she would find peace and make better choices in the future. He told her I was praying for her recovery, even if I could not pray for her redemption. It was not a gracious letter. It was not a loving letter. But it was honest, and that was the best I could do. Mark did not know about Patricia's letter. I never asked, and I never told him. So many things were better left in the past, buried under the weight of all the mistakes and regrets that had brought us to this point. What mattered now was the present, the fragile new beginning we were building together. What mattered was the future, the legacy we were passing on to the next generation. And what mattered most was the simple truth that family was not always easy. Family was not always perfect. But family was worth fighting for, even when it felt like everything was lost. The store continued to grow under my niece's careful guidance. She implemented new marketing strategies, expanded the online presence, and built relationships with local contractors and builders. She modernized the inventory system, streamlined the accounting procedures, and hired a small team of dedicated employees who shared her vision for the future. She was everything her father was not, and that was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because she brought hope and energy to the business. A curse because every time I looked at her, I saw Mark's face and remembered all the pain he had caused. But I was learning to separate the two. My niece was not her father. She was her own person, with her own dreams and her own values. She had earned her place in the business through hard work and dedication, not through fraud and manipulation. And she deserved to be judged on her own merits, not on the sins of her parent. That was the lesson I was slowly learning, the wisdom that came from years of pain and reflection. People could change. People could grow. People could become better versions of themselves, if they were given the chance and the support to do so. Mark was proof of that. My niece was proof of that. And maybe, just maybe, I was proof of that too. The first anniversary of my surgery came and went with little fanfare. Mark and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at the store, just the two of us, sharing a bottle of wine and reminiscing about our childhood. We talked about our father, the farming accident that had taken him too soon, the way our mother had held the family together through those difficult years. We talked about our grandfather, the man who had built Harrison's Hardware with nothing but determination and a dream. We talked about the future, the plans for the store, the hope that the next generation would carry on the legacy we had fought so hard to protect. And we talked about forgiveness, the slow and painful process of healing wounds that had seemed impossible to heal. I don't know if I will ever fully trust you again, I said honestly. But I am willing to try. That's the best I can offer. Mark nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. That's more than I deserve, he said. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. We clinked our glasses together, a silent toast to new beginnings and second chances. It was not a perfect moment. It was not a fairy tale ending. But it was real, and honest, and that was enough. The winter months passed into spring, and spring into summer. The store thrived under my niece's leadership, and I found myself stepping back more and more, trusting her to handle the day-to-day operations. Mark continued to work in the background, reliable and steady, never asking for more than he had earned. And I continued to heal, not just physically from the surgery, but emotionally from the years of pain and betrayal. It was not a linear process. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, times when the old anger and suspicion would surface and threaten to undo all the progress we had made. But we kept moving forward, one day at a time, one step at a time. My relationship with Mark was different now. More distant, more cautious, but also more honest. We no longer pretended that everything was fine. We acknowledged the pain, the betrayal, the broken trust. But we also acknowledged the possibility of redemption, the hope that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and effort. He started inviting Mark to family gatherings again, holidays and birthdays and Sunday dinners. He accepted the invitations with gratitude, always careful not to overstep, always mindful of the boundaries I had set. He watched his daughter grow into a successful businesswoman, and I could see the pride and regret mingled in his eyes. He had missed so much of her life, locked away in a prison cell. He was determined not to miss the rest of it. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my house watching the sunset, Mark turned to me with a question that had clearly been weighing on his mind. "Do you think Dad would have forgiven me?" he asked quietly. "For what I did to you, to the business, to the family?" I thought about our father, the man who had worked so hard to build something for his children. I thought about the values he had instilled in us, the importance of honesty and integrity and hard work. And I thought about the love he had shown us, even when we made mistakes, even when we disappointed him. "I think Dad would have been incredibly disappointed in you," I said honestly. "But I also think he would have forgiven you. He was a good man, and he believed in second chances. That's why he built this store in the first place. He wanted to give people a second chance to build something meaningful." Mark was silent for a long moment, staring out at the horizon. "I wish I could tell him I'm sorry," he said finally. "I wish I could explain why I did what I did. I wish I could make him understand that I'm not the same person I was back then." "Maybe you can," I said. "Not in person, not the way you mean. But by the way you live your life from now on. By the choices you make, the person you become. That's how we honor the people we've lost. Not with words, but with actions." Mark nodded slowly, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "You're right," he said. "I can't change the past. But I can make sure the future is different. He can be the person Dad wanted me to be. He can be the brother you deserve." We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. It was a moment of peace, rare and precious, a small victory in the long war against our shared demons. That was the summer my niece officially took over as the manager of Harrison's Hardware. She was just 24 years old, but she had earned the position through years of hard work and dedication. I signed over the day-to-day operations to her, keeping only a small role as consultant and advisor. It was time. I was 66 years old, and my health was not getting any better. My heart condition required constant monitoring, and the stress of running the business was taking its toll. Mark continued to work at the store, now reporting to his daughter. It was an unusual arrangement, father working for daughter, but they made it work with professionalism and mutual respect. Mark had found his place in the family again, even if it was not the place he had once imagined. And I had found my place too, not as the owner of Harrison's Hardware, but as the guardian of its legacy. He spent my days visiting the store, offering advice, telling stories about our grandfather and father to the young employees who had never known them. He helped customers find the right tools, just like I had done for 42 years. He sat in the office and watched the next generation take over, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. The knowledge that the Harrison legacy would continue, that our family's name would be remembered for something good, that the store would survive long after I was gone. It was not a perfect legacy. It was not a flawless story. But it was ours, and that made it precious. The second anniversary of Mark's release from prison came and went. He was still on parole, still under supervision, still paying restitution. But he was also a different person from the man who had betrayed me. He had changed, grown, matured in ways that prison had forced upon him. He had learned humility and gratitude and the true value of family. He had earned back small pieces of trust, one day at a time, one honest action at a time. It would never be the same as before. The innocence of our childhood, the trust of our early adulthood, those were gone forever. But what we had now was something else. Something more fragile, but also more precious. Something built on the foundation of forgiveness and redemption, a foundation that had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger than before. I thought about the day the FBI had arrested Mark, the look of shock and fear on his face. I thought about the trial, the conviction, the years of silence between us. He thought about the letters he had written, each one more honest and humble than the last. And I thought about the first time we had sat down together after his release, the awkward conversation, the careful words, the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. We were still rebuilding, still working at it, still discovering new layers of hurt and healing. But we were doing it together, and that was all that mattered. My health continued to decline, slowly but steadily. The doctors warned me to reduce stress, eat better, exercise more. I did my best, but the damage had been done. The years of worry and betrayal had taken their toll on my heart, both literally and figuratively. I accepted my limitations with the same pragmatic attitude I had brought to everything else in my life. I could not change the past. I could not control the future. All I could do was live each day as fully as possible, surrounded by the people I loved, doing the work that gave my life meaning. And that was enough. Mark and I spent more time together as the years passed. We traveled to our childhood home, now owned by a young family who had no idea of its history. We visited our father's grave together, leaving flowers and quiet prayers. We sat on the porch and watched the sunset, just like we had done as children. It was not a grand reconciliation. There were no dramatic moments or tearful confessions. Just two old men, bound by blood and history, learning to love each other again in the quiet spaces between words. And that, I realized, was the best kind of forgiveness. Not the kind that erased the past, but the kind that allowed you to move forward anyway. Not the kind that made everything better, but the kind that made everything bearable. The autumn of my 67th year brought changes I had not anticipated. My niece announced she was getting married to a young architect from Des Moines, a kind man who appreciated her ambition and supported her dreams. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the store's main aisle among the shelves of tools and paint and lumber. It was exactly where she wanted it, surrounded by the legacy she had worked so hard to preserve. Mark walked her down the aisle, his eyes glistening with tears of pride and regret. He had missed so many of her milestones, locked away in a prison cell. But he was here for this one, and that meant everything to her. He watched from the front row, my heart full of conflicting emotions. Breathe in my niece, happiness for her future, and a deep, aching sadness for all the years we had lost to betrayal and anger. The reception was held in the store's parking lot, transformed with string lights and folding tables. The community came out in force, customers and neighbors and friends who had supported us through the darkest days. There was laughter and music and dancing, the kind of celebration that reminded me why we had fought so hard to save this business. It was not just about the money. It was about the connections, the relationships, the web of human kindness that held our small town together. Mark stood in the corner, watching his daughter dance with her new husband. He walked over to him, 2 glasses of champagne in my hands. "You did good," I said, handing him a glass. "Raising her. She turned out to be an amazing woman." Mark shook his head slowly. "I didn't raise her. Her mother did. He was in prison for most of her teenage years. He missed everything. But you're here now," I said. "That's what matters. You showed up. You stayed. You earned your place back in her life." "It's not the same," he said quietly. "It will never be the same." He missed her first day of high school. He missed her graduation. He missed every birthday and holiday and parent-teacher conference. He can't get those back. He put my hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. "No, you can't. But you can be here for everything that comes next. Her children, her successes, her challenges. You can be the grandfather she deserves, the father she needs. That's what redemption looks like. Not erasing the past, but building a better future." Mark nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you, Walter. For everything. For giving me a second chance. For not giving up on me. I almost did," I admitted. "There were times when I thought I would never speak to you again. Times when the anger was so strong I couldn't see anything else. But I'm glad I didn't give up. I'm glad we kept trying." We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration unfold around us. It was not a perfect moment. It was not a fairy tale ending. But it was real and honest, and that was enough. The wedding marked a turning point in our family's history. My niece and her husband moved into a small house just down the street from the store, close enough that she could walk to work every morning. He took a job with a local architecture firm, designing homes and commercial buildings throughout the region. They talked about having children, continuing the Harrison legacy into the next generation. Mark continued to work at the store, now in a supervisory role that gave him more responsibility without access to financial systems. He was respected by the employees, trusted by the customers, and valued by his daughter. He had earned his place back in the family, even if it was a different place than the one he had once occupied. He stepped back further from the business, visiting only a few times a week to offer advice and tell stories. My health was fragile, my energy limited, and I had accepted that my role in the Harrison legacy was coming to an end. But I was at peace with that. He had done my part. I had protected the business, rebuilt the trust, and passed the torch to the next generation. Now it was time to rest, to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and to watch the legacy continue to grow. Mark started visiting me more often, bringing dinner and conversation and the kind of easy companionship we had not shared in decades. We would sit on my porch and watch the sunset, just like we had done as children. We would talk about old memories and new hopes, about our father and grandfather, about the future we were building together. One evening, as the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp with the promise of autumn, Mark turned to me with a question that caught me off guard. "Walter, do you ever think about what happens after? When we're gone, I mean. Do you think Dad and Grandpa are watching us?" He thought about my answer for a long moment. It was not a question I had considered seriously, not in the way Mark was asking. But the question deserved an honest response. "I don't know," I said finally. "I like to think they are. I like to think they're proud of what we've built, what we've protected. But even if they're not watching, even if there's nothing after this, what we've done still matters. We've created something that will outlast us. We've built a legacy that will continue for generations. That's not nothing. Mark nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I want to be worthy of that legacy, he said. I want my grandchildren to know that their grandfather made mistakes, but he also learned from them. It changed. It grew. It became a better person. You already are worthy, I said. Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying. Because you're willing to do the hard work of redemption. That's what matters most. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. It was a moment of peace, rare and precious, a small victory in the long war against our shared demons. And it was enough. The winter brought more changes. My niece announced she was pregnant, the first child of the next generation to be born into the Harrison family. Mark was overjoyed, already planning for the baby's future, already imagining the stories he would tell and the lessons he would teach. I watched his excitement with a mixture of joy and melancholy. He would not be around to see this child grow up, not completely. The doctors had been clear about my prognosis. My heart was failing, and there was nothing more they could do. But I had accepted that reality. He had lived a full life, a meaningful life, a life that had made a difference in the world. And I had made my peace with the people I loved, including the brother who had once betrayed me. The day I received the news about my niece's pregnancy, I asked Mark to come to the store after closing. He found me in the office, surrounded by the photographs and documents that told the story of our family's legacy. The original articles of incorporation, yellowed with age. The partnership agreements, both the forged one and the genuine one. The deeds and contracts and insurance policies that had been stolen and recovered. I want you to have these, I said, pushing a box across the desk. All the documents that prove what we've built, what we've protected. I want you to keep them safe for the next generation. Mark looked at the box, his eyes filled with confusion. Walter, what are you talking about? Why are you giving these to me now? Because I won't be here much longer, I said simply. The doctors told me I have 6 months, maybe less. And I want to make sure everything is in order before I go. Mark's face crumpled with emotion. He had known about my declining health, of course, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it real in a way that nothing else could. No, he said, shaking his head stubbornly. You're not going anywhere. You're going to fight this. You're going to beat it, just like you beat everything else. Mark, I'm tired, I said gently. I've been fighting for so long. The fraud, the trial, the recovery, the healing. I'm ready to rest. I'm ready to see Margaret again, to see Dad and Grandpa. eBay made my peace with it. But I'm not ready, Mark said, his voice breaking. I just got you back. He just started to rebuild our relationship. You can't leave me now. Not when we've come so far. I'm not leaving you, I said. I'm just moving on to the next thing. And I need to know that you'll carry on the legacy. That you'll protect the store and the family and everything we've built. Can you do that for me? Mark was silent for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Then he nodded slowly. I can do that, he said. I swear on our father's grave. He will protect this store and this family with everything I have. He will make sure the next generation knows our story, the good parts and the bad parts. I will make sure they understand that redemption is possible, that mistakes don't define us, that we can always choose to become better people. He reached across the desk and took his hand. That's all I ever wanted, I said. That's all I ever needed to hear. The next few months were bittersweet. I spent as much time as possible with my family, soaking up every moment of connection and love. I watched my niece's belly grow, imagining the child that would soon join our family. I sat with Mark on the porch, watching the sunset, talking about old times and new hopes. He visited the store for the last time, walking through the aisles and saying goodbye to the place that had been my home for so many years. And when the end finally came, it was peaceful. He was surrounded by the people I loved, drifting off to sleep with the sound of their voices in my ears. Mark was holding my hand when I took my last breath. He was crying, but there was also a strange peace in his eyes, a quiet acceptance that I had done my part and it was time to rest. "Goodbye, Walter," he whispered. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for never giving up on me." And then I was gone, my long journey finally complete. The funeral was held at the store, just as I had requested. The main aisle was lined with flowers and photographs, a testament to the life I had lived and the legacy I had left behind. Mark gave the eulogy, his voice thick with emotion but steady. He spoke of our childhood, our struggles, our triumphs. He spoke of the betrayal and the redemption, the pain and the healing. And he spoke of the lessons I had taught him, the importance of family and forgiveness and the power of second chances. My niece spoke too, sharing memories of the uncle who had guided her, mentored her, and loved her like a daughter. She promised to carry on the legacy, to protect the store, and to teach her children the values that had made our family strong. After the funeral, Mark gathered the family together in the office. He opened the box of documents I had given him, spreading them across the desk for everyone to see. "This is our history," he said. "The good parts and the bad parts. The mistakes and the triumphs. I want us to learn from all of it. I want us to remember that we are capable of great things, but we are also capable of great mistakes. The key is to never stop trying, never stop growing, never stop becoming better versions of ourselves." My niece nodded solemnly, her hand resting on her belly. "I will teach my children that," she said. "I will teach them about Uncle Walter and about you, Dad. I will teach them that our family's legacy is not just about the store, but about the values we carry in our hearts." Mark smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's all any of us can ask for," he said. "A legacy that lives on in the hearts of the next generation." The years that followed were a testament to the foundation we had built. My niece gave birth to a daughter, named Margaret after my beloved wife. Mark became a doting grandfather, spending every spare moment with the little girl who reminded him so much of his own daughter at that age. The store continued to thrive, expanding and modernizing while staying true to its roots. And the Harrison family name became synonymous with resilience, integrity, and the power of redemption. People came from all over to hear our story, to learn from our mistakes, and to be inspired by our healing. Mark spoke at conferences and workshops, sharing the lessons he had learned from his own downfall and his journey back to grace. He was not a perfect man, and he never pretended to be. But he was honest about his flaws, open about his struggles, and committed to helping others avoid the same pitfalls. He watched all of this from wherever I was, and I felt a deep sense of peace. The legacy was secure. The family was whole. The story had a happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because we had found a way to make peace with our imperfections. We had learned that family loyalty and family trust were not the same thing. We had learned that blood was not thicker than evidence, but it was thicker than anger and resentment. And we had learned that the greatest gift we could give each other was not forgiveness, but the opportunity to earn it. Mark visited my grave every Sunday, bringing flowers and stories about the latest adventures in the store and the family. He told me about Margaret's first steps, her first words, her first day of school. He told me about the store's expansion, the new employees, the loyal customers who had become like family. And he told me about his own journey, the ongoing struggle to be a better man, a better father, a better brother. He could not answer him, of course. But I like to think I was listening, somewhere in the quiet spaces between worlds. He liked to think I was proud of the man he had become, the redemption he had earned, the legacy he had helped to build. On the 10th anniversary of my death, Mark gathered the entire family at the store for a celebration. My niece was now the president of the company, her daughter a bright-eyed teenager with dreams of following in her footsteps. Mark was retired, but he still came to the store every day, just to be there, just to feel the pulse of the business that had been the center of our lives for so long. He stood in the office, surrounded by the documents and photographs that told our family's story, and he addressed the gathered crowd. This store was built by our grandfather in 1952, he said. It was sustained by our father, then by Walter, then by me, even in my darkest moments. And now it's carried forward by my daughter and will soon be carried forward by her daughter. This is our legacy. This is what we fought for. This is what we will protect for future generations. It paused, his eyes glistening with emotion. I made terrible mistakes in my life. He hurt the people I loved most. He betrayed the trust of my family and my community. But I was given a second chance, a chance to become a better person. And I like to think I made the most of it. I like to think that Walter, wherever he is proud of the man I became. There was not a dry eye in the room. My niece stepped forward, taking her father's hand. He is proud, Dad, she said softly. We all are. The celebration continued into the night, filled with laughter and music and the kind of joy that only comes from healing old wounds. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between worlds, I smiled. The legacy was secure. The family was whole. And the story of Harrison's hardware was far from over. It was just beginning a new chapter, one filled with hope and promise and the enduring power of redemption. The next chapter of our family's story began on a crisp October morning, just like the one when everything had fallen apart so many years ago. My niece Margaret, named after my beloved wife, was now 19 years old and had just started her sophomore year at the University of Iowa. She was studying business administration with a minor in history, determined to understand both the practical and the philosophical aspects of running a family enterprise. She came home every weekend to work at the store, learning the ropes from her mother and grandfather. Mark was 73 now, his hair completely white, his movements slower but his mind still sharp as a tack. He had become something of a local legend, the reformed criminal who had turned his life around and become a pillar of the community. People came from neighboring towns just to meet him, to hear his story, to be inspired by his redemption. The store had expanded significantly over the past decade. We had purchased a vacant lot next door, just as I had always dreamed, and built a state-of-the-art showroom and warehouse. The old building remained intact, preserved as a museum of sorts, filled with the artifacts and photographs that told our family's history. Tourists came through regularly, guided by Mark himself, who had become an expert storyteller. He never shied away from the darker chapters of our history. He spoke honestly about his crimes, his imprisonment, his journey back to grace. He used his story to teach others about the dangers of greed and the power of redemption. And every time he told it, he honored my memory and the legacy we had built together. One evening, as the store was closing and the autumn leaves swirled in the parking lot, Margaret approached her grandfather with a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about the family business," she said, sitting across from him in the office. "And I've been thinking about what I want to do with my life. You want to carry on the legacy, but I also want to make it my own. Is that okay?" Mark smiled, a warm and genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Of course it's okay, sweetheart. That's exactly what your great-grandfather would have wanted. He didn't build this store so we could keep it exactly the same forever. He built it so we could grow and adapt and make it our own." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "I've been doing some research on small business trends. The hardware industry is changing fast. Big box stores are struggling, but specialty stores like ours are finding new ways to compete. I think we could do more with online sales, maybe even start a delivery service for contractors and builders in the region." Mark leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Tell me more about this idea. What are you thinking?" Margaret pulled out her laptop, showing him the research she had compiled. Market analysis, competitor assessments, financial projections, everything a young entrepreneur needed to make a compelling case. Mark listened carefully, asking questions and offering suggestions. He was impressed by her thoroughness, her intelligence, her passion for the business. "You've done your homework," he said when she finished. "This is a solid plan. But you know, there's more to running this store than just the numbers. That is the human element. The relationships with customers and vendors and employees. That's what makes this place special. That's what will keep us competitive." "I know," Margaret said. "And that's why I want to learn from you. Not just the business stuff, but the people stuff. The wisdom you've gained from all your years of experience." Mark reached across the desk and took his granddaughter's hand. "I would be honored to teach you everything I know," he said. "But I should warn you. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. So many of them were terrible. You have to learn from my failures as well as my successes. That's what makes your story so powerful, Grandpa," Margaret said. "You didn't just succeed. You failed, and then you came back stronger. That's the lesson I want to learn. That's the legacy I want to carry forward." Mark's eyes glistened with emotion. He thought about the years he had spent in prison, the shame and regret that had consumed him. He thought about the long road back to his family, the slow rebuilding of trust and love. And he thought about the future, the young woman sitting across from him who represented everything that was good and hopeful about the next generation. "You're going to do great things," he said. "I know you will." The weeks that followed were filled with planning and preparation. Margaret worked alongside her mother and grandfather, learning every aspect of the business. She shadowed the store manager, the inventory specialist, the marketing coordinator. She met with vendors and suppliers, building relationships that would serve her well in the future. And she started implementing her ideas, one by one. The online store launched on schedule, with a beautiful design and user-friendly interface. The delivery service followed shortly after, targeting contractors and builders in the region. Both initiatives were successful, bringing in new customers and increasing revenue. The store was thriving, more than it had in years, and the entire family was proud of Margaret's achievements. But success brought new challenges. With the expansion came new pressures, new responsibilities, new opportunities for things to go wrong. Margaret found herself working longer hours, dealing with more stress, facing more difficult decisions. She started to feel the weight of the legacy, the expectations that came with being a Harrison. She began to doubt herself, to wonder if she was truly capable of carrying on the family business. One night, after a particularly difficult week, she sat alone in the office, staring at the photographs on the wall. Great-grandfather Walter, the founder. Great-uncle Walter, the savior. Grandfather Mark, the redeemed. And now her, the next generation, trying to live up to all that history. Mark found her there, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside her. "What's going on?" "What's wrong?" "I don't know if I can do this," Margaret said, her voice choked with emotion. "There's so much pressure. Everyone expects me to be perfect, to carry on the legacy, to make everyone proud. But what if I fail? What if I let everyone down?" Mark put his arm around his granddaughter, pulling her close. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Failure is not the end of the world." He failed spectacularly. He hurt the people I loved most. He broke the law and went to prison. And yet, here I am, I'm still here, still part of this family, still able to contribute. Failure doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do after you fail. How you pick yourself up and keep going. Margaret looked up at her grandfather, her eyes still wet with tears. "But you were so strong," she said. "You came back from everything." "I don't know if I could do that." Mark shook his head slowly. "I wasn't strong, Margaret. He was broken. He was lost. He didn't know if I could ever find my way back. But I had people who believed in me. Your grandmother, your mother, your great-uncle Walter. They gave me the strength to keep going. And that's what you have too. You have a family that loves you and believes in you. You have a community that supports you. You have everything you need to succeed. You just have to believe in yourself." Margaret took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Thank you, Grandpa," she said. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime, sweetheart," Mark said. "That's what family is for. We lift each other up when we're down. We support each other through the hard times. And we celebrate together in the good times. That's the real legacy of this family. Not the store, not the money, but the love and support we give each other." The next morning, Margaret arrived at the store with renewed determination. She had a clear vision for the future, and she was ready to fight for it. She implemented new systems, hired new staff, and continued to expand the online presence. She also made time for the personal connections that had always been the heart of the business. She learned her customers' names, remembered their stories, helped them find exactly what they needed. She became a trusted advisor, a friendly face, a familiar presence in their lives. And in doing so, she earned their loyalty and respect. Years passed, and Margaret grew into her role as the leader of the family business. She married a kind man who supported her dreams, and together they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. The children grew up in the store, just as she had, learning the values of hard work and integrity from an early age. Mark continued to be a presence in their lives, telling stories and sharing wisdom. It was the beloved patriarch, the grandfather who had made terrible mistakes and somehow found his way back to grace. On the 20th anniversary of my death, the family gathered once again at the store. Mark was 83 now, frail but still sharp. He had outlived all expectations, defying the doctors who had predicted an early end. He attributed his longevity to the love of his family, the purpose he had found in his work, and the peace he had made with his past. The celebration was more subdued than the previous ones, more reflective. The family sat together in the office, looking at the photographs and documents that told their story. Mark stood up slowly, using his cane for support, and addressed the gathered crowd. "I've been thinking a lot about Walter lately," he said. "About everything we went through together. The betrayal, the anger, the long road back to forgiveness. I miss him every single day. But I also know he's watching over us, proud of what we've become. We've built something remarkable here. Not just a successful business, but a family that supports each other, that lifts each other up, that never gives up on each other." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I was not a perfect man. I made terrible mistakes. But I was given a second chance, and I like to think I made the most of it. I like to think I became the man our father always believed I could be. And I want you all to know that I love you. Every single one of you. You are my legacy. You are the reason I kept going. You are the reason I found my way back to grace." The room was silent, filled with the weight of his words. Then Margaret stood up and walked over to her grandfather, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. "We love you too, Grandpa," she said. "And we're so proud of you. You showed us that redemption is possible. You showed us that we can always become better versions of ourselves. That's the most powerful lesson anyone could ever teach." The others gathered around, forming a circle of love and support. It was a moment of pure connection, a celebration of all that they had overcome together. That night, after everyone had left and the store was quiet, Mark sat alone in the office. He looked at the photographs on the wall, the faces of the people who had shaped his life. His father, his brother, his daughter, his granddaughter. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment, the long and winding road from betrayal to redemption. And he felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet contentment that he had done his part, that he had honored the legacy, that he had become the man he had always wanted to be. "You did good, Walter," he whispered to the empty room. "You did good." And somewhere in the quiet spaces between worlds, I smiled. The legacy was secure. The family was whole. And the story was far from over. It was just beginning another chapter, one filled with hope and promise and the enduring power of love. The final chapter of our family's story began on a quiet Sunday morning in late spring. The store was closed, as it always was on Sundays, but the family had gathered for a special occasion. Margaret's daughter, Emily, had just turned 16 and was about to start her first job at the store, continuing the tradition that had defined our family for nearly a century. Mark was 91 now, frail and mostly confined to a wheelchair, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. His eyes still sparkled with mischief and wisdom, and his voice still carried the weight of all the lessons he had learned. The family gathered in the office, surrounded by the photographs and documents that told our story. Emily stood in front of them all, nervous but excited, ready to begin her journey as the next generation of Harrison's hardware. "Grandpa," she said, turning to Mark, "I want to make you proud. I want to carry on the legacy. I want to be worthy of everything this family has built." Mark reached out and took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "You already make me proud, Emily. Used by being who you are. The legacy isn't about the store or the money or the history. It's about the values we carry in our hearts. Honesty. Integrity. Hard work. Love. If you carry those values with you, everything else will fall into place." Emily nodded solemnly, absorbing his words. "I understand, Grandpa. I do my best. That's all any of us can do," Mark said. That's all any of us ever could do. The weeks that followed were filled with learning and growth. Emily shadowed her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandfather, learning the ins and outs of the business. She stocked shelves, helped customers, managed inventory, and processed orders. She asked questions constantly, eager to understand every aspect of the operation. She was determined to prove herself, to earn her place in the family legacy. Mark watched her with pride, seeing in her the same fire and determination that had driven me, had driven our father, had driven our grandfather. He knew that she would carry the legacy forward, that she would make us all proud. But time was running out for Mark. His health was failing rapidly, his body finally succumbing to the years of wear and tear. The doctors had been clear, he had months, maybe weeks, maybe days. He accepted the news with the same grace and dignity he had shown throughout his redemption journey. He had made peace with his past, with his family, with his God. He was ready to go. The family gathered around him in his final days, taking turns sitting with him, holding his hand, telling him stories. Margaret was there, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. Emily was there too, trying to be brave, trying to be strong for her mother and her great-grandfather. On the last day of his life, Mark asked to see everyone one final time. The family gathered in his bedroom, surrounding his bed with love and support. "I want to say something to all of you," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I've had a long and complicated life. I made terrible mistakes. I hurt the people I loved most. But I was given a second chance, and I tried my best to make the most of it. I want you to remember that. No matter how far you fall, no matter how many mistakes you make, you can always come back. You can always become a better person." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And I want you to remember Walter. He was the best of us. He taught me what forgiveness really means. He taught me that family is worth fighting for, even when it feels like everything is lost. He saved me. He saved all of us." Margaret leaned forward, pressing her forehead to her father's. "We remember, Dad. We always remember. And we'll always be grateful for everything you taught us." Mark smiled weakly, his eyes closing. "I love you all," he whispered. "I love you all so much." And then he was gone, slipping away peacefully with his family around him. The room was filled with tears and quiet sobs, but there was also a sense of peace, a sense that Mark had completed his journey and was finally at rest. The funeral was held at the store, just as Mark had requested. The main aisle was lined with flowers and photographs, a testament to the life he had lived and the redemption he had earned. Margaret gave the eulogy, her voice filled with love and gratitude. "My father was a complicated man," she said. "He made terrible mistakes, and he paid for them. But he also worked harder than anyone I know to become a better person. He earned back our trust, our love, our respect. He showed us that redemption is possible, that we can always become better versions of ourselves. That was his greatest gift to us." Emily also spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "My great-grandfather taught me that family is everything," she said. "He taught me that we can always come back from our mistakes. He taught me to never give up on the people we love. He will carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life." After the funeral, the family gathered in the office, just as we had done so many times before. They looked at the photographs on the wall, the faces of the people who had shaped their lives. Margaret turned to her daughter, her eyes still red from crying. "Emily," she said, "I want you to have this." She handed her daughter a small wooden box, the same box that had held all the important documents of our family's history. Emily opened it carefully, revealing the original articles of incorporation from 1952, the partnership agreements, the deeds and contracts and insurance policies. And at the very bottom of the box, a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. It was a letter, written in Mark's handwriting, addressed to the next generation. Dear Emily, the letter read. By the time you read this, I will be gone. But I want you to know that I am so proud of you, and I believe in you completely. You have the strength, the intelligence, and the heart to carry on our family's legacy. Never forget where you came from, but never be afraid to chart your own path. The store is not just a building full of tools and supplies. It is a symbol of everything our family stands for. Hard work, honesty, integrity, love, and most of all, the power of redemption. I made terrible mistakes in my life, but I was given a second chance, and I tried to make the most of it. I hope my story inspires you to always be better, to always try harder, to never give up on the people you love. Your great-grandfather, Mark. Emily read the letter aloud, her voice breaking with emotion. When she finished, the room was silent, filled with the weight of his words. Margaret reached out and took her daughter's hand. He loved you so much, she said. He was so proud of you. And he was right. You have everything you need to carry on this legacy. We all believe in you. Emily nodded, wiping away her tears. I won't let him down, she said. I won't let any of you down. The years that followed were a testament to Emily's determination and resilience. She took over the day-to-day operations of the store, just as her mother had done before her. She implemented new technologies, expanded the online presence, and built relationships with a new generation of customers. She also preserved the traditions that had made the store special, the personal connections, the community involvement, the commitment to quality and service. She was the perfect blend of old and new, honoring the past while embracing the future. The store continued to thrive, a beacon of stability and hope in a rapidly changing world. Emily eventually married and had children of her own. She raised them in the store, just as she had been raised, teaching them the values and traditions that had defined our family for generations. She told them the stories of their ancestors, the triumphs and the failures, the joys and the sorrows. She made sure they understood that the Harrison legacy was not just about the business, but about the love and resilience that had sustained the family through every challenge. The children grew up with a deep appreciation for their heritage, and they carried the values of hard work, honesty, and integrity into their own lives. On the 50th anniversary of the day I discovered Mark's betrayal, the family gathered at the store for a celebration. It was a bittersweet occasion, a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had overcome. Emily stood at the front of the room, surrounded by her family and her community. Today marks 50 years since our family faced its greatest challenge, she said. But it also marks 50 years since we began our journey toward healing and redemption. We have faced adversity, we have faced betrayal, but we have never given up. We have always believed in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of change. That is our legacy. That is what we will pass on to the next generation. The crowd erupted in applause, their faces filled with pride and emotion. Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. I want to thank my great-grandfather Mark for showing us that redemption is possible. I want to thank my great-uncle Walter for teaching us the importance of family and forgiveness. And I want to thank my mother for carrying on the legacy and teaching me everything I know. This store is not just a business. It is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It is a reminder that we can always come back from our mistakes. It is a symbol of hope for the future. The celebration continued late into the night, filled with laughter and music and the kind of joy that only comes from healing old wounds. The family danced together, told stories, and made plans for the future. Emily knew that the legacy was secure, that the next generation would carry on the traditions that had defined the Harrison name for nearly a century. And she knew that Mark and Walter were watching from somewhere beyond, proud of everything the family had accomplished. That night, after everyone had left and the store was quiet, Emily sat alone in the office. She looked at the photographs on the wall, the faces of the people who had made this legacy possible. Her great-grandfather Walter, who had saved the store from betrayal. Her grandfather Mark, who had found redemption against all odds. Her mother Margaret, who had carried on the legacy with grace and determination. And now her, the latest in a long line of Harrisons who had dedicated their lives to this family business. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for believing in me." She reached into the wooden box and pulled out the letter Mark had written to her so many years ago. She read it again, her heart filled with gratitude and love. And she made a silent promise to carry on the legacy, to honor the memory of those who had come before her, and to build a future that would make them proud. The store continued to operate for many more years, a testament to the strength and resilience of the Harrison family. Emily retired eventually, passing the reins to her own daughter, who carried on the traditions with the same dedication and passion. The story of Harrison's hardware became a legend in the community, a symbol of hope and redemption for anyone who had ever made mistakes and wondered if they could ever find their way back. And the legacy of the Harrison family lived on, inspiring future generations to believe in second chances, to fight for the people they loved, and to never give up on the dream of becoming better versions of themselves. As I look back on everything that happened, from that fateful Tuesday morning when my phone rang to the beautiful legacy we built together, I am filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that made us stronger. Gratitude for the forgiveness that healed our wounds. Gratitude for the love that sustained us through the darkest times. Our family's story is not a perfect one. It is filled with mistakes and betrayals and pain. But it is also filled with redemption and forgiveness and love. And that, I believe, is the most powerful legacy of all. The skills that built your career don't disappear when you retire. They become the weapons that can save your life when everything you have worked for is under attack from the people you trusted most. Blood may be thicker than water, but it is not thicker than evidence. And sometimes protecting your family's legacy means protecting it from your own family. But it also means giving them a chance to earn back what they lost, if they are willing to work for it. That was the lesson I learned from Mark, the brother who betrayed me and then found his way back to grace. That is the lesson I hope future generations will carry with them, the legacy of forgiveness and redemption that defines the Harrison name. The hardware store is not just a building full of tools and paint and lumber. It is a monument to the values that built our family. Hard work, honesty, integrity, and sometimes, when we are lucky enough, forgiveness. That is the legacy my grandfather would have wanted most of all. And that is the legacy I will carry with me for the rest of my life, wherever that life may lead. The story of Harrison's hardware is far from over. It will continue to evolve, to adapt, to inspire future generations. Because that is what legacies do. They live on, passed from one generation to the next, carrying the hopes and dreams of all those who came before. And as long as there is a Harrison to carry the torch, the legacy will never truly end. So as I close this chapter of our family's story, I do so with hope in my heart and gratitude in my soul. We have overcome so much together, faced so many challenges, and emerged stronger every time. Our family's legacy is not about perfection. It is about resilience. It is about the courage to face our mistakes and the strength to become better. It is about the love that binds us together, even when everything seems to be falling apart. That is the true story of Harrison's Hardware. And that is the story I leave for future generations, a story of hope and redemption and the enduring power of family.